manufacturing mocap for cinematics. Stig Meddy and I came down here about 4 months ago just to tour the facilities. It's really impressive down here, actually. It's a big stage. They do full body mocap. They can do hands and faces down here, and they have a ton of crazy toys. It's amazing that we have this facility that Sony owns that is basically at our disposal, and the teams here are really great.
They're suiting up. Getting her suited up for the day, yeah. Velcro custom suit we get made specifically for motion capture. We have some colored panels on there just to accentuate the actors when they're out there, just to make sure that we can see exactly what's going on instead of having an all-black suit with the all-black floor.
This is the Gumby suit.
I need a mocap.
Mocap is basically markers in space that are seen by cameras. They're calibrated to be able to be triangulated into a certain point in space.
It really serves as kind of a basis for us to layer animation on top of.
Got a little coffee, my shades on. This is how we do LA mocap.
Ankle and knee. This is called the range of motion, where we show all of our flexibility and bendability of our body so that the computer can track our markers.
Gaia and Titans are going to be climbing up Mount Olympus, so this is our Mount Olympus right there.
Don't try this at home, kids.
As much as I've directed before was with my little sister and my little brother when we were kids, and our parents had the video camera. But it's fun. I think if you know what to do, you can communicate with people honestly, and you know what you want, they love it, and people are having fun if you are. Ariel, we're going to do the following now?
We're not necessarily as concerned with perfection in really subtle movements, because we know that subtle animation is going to be done by the animators in-house. As long as we can see the character there, then we're getting what we want.
This is the real-time feed of the actual character of the motion capture being done. So you're actually seeing like a stick figure, but it's actually a skeletal figure of Richard, the actor, being out there.
We don't see your feet in that shot, so it doesn't really matter where they are. And break your symmetry if you can, so both arms aren't exactly the same. Rolling. All right, thank you. That was good.
Yeah, what you're actually seeing here is the mocap actor actually driving the Gaia character in real time. So
Hair down.
it's definitely amazing technology.
Take two, ready. Rolling.
All right, good, thank you.
Eddie is doing well. He's been a great director. Definitely knows the shot he wants, and he gets it.
You sit at a desk all day, and I also like to move around. I think as a director, you should be able, to a certain degree, to do what your actors are doing. So you know what you're asking of them. You can show them if you have to, and I don't know, you get closer to their performance. Don't ever put that in the making of video.
This is actually a first for me to do motion capture on a bed with pillows.
We are working on the
Sex meeting.
sex mini game with Aphrodite. So we'll have two of the girls today just doing both the parts of the servant girls and Aphrodite, which we have blocked out. So should be an interesting afternoon. If we have time tomorrow, after we will put Meddy in a suit, because there are some things I'm sure.
If I'm gonna do that, I'd rather do it now to do the sex mini game with Ava and Michelle.
Well, I'm not directing it if you get in a suit, that's all I
I'll
gotta
direct
say.
from the bed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Aphrodite, I'm like, you touch me here, you put your leg there. Let's do take 55. Ava? All right, let's do take one.
Kratos, it's been far too long. Even though you are no longer the god of war, you can still share my bed. Come, Kratos. Let us forget all about Zeus for a while.
You know I cannot.
Ah, is that what has you all worked up? You are trying to figure out that bridge contraption out there. Please do not deny me this one last pleasure.
That was great. Cut.
Ah. Is that what has you all worked up? You are trying to figure out that bridge contraption out there. You men and your toys.
Exactly. That's good.
I think for casting for this, Betty found people who were good with their body in terms of motion.
We picked actors that had to be comfortable with a little bit of stunt work and a little bit of naughty work.
The God of War 3 music production plan is pretty extensive. Today we're working at Skywalker Sound in Marin County. We're working with the San Francisco-based musicians from the San Francisco Symphony, the San Francisco Opera, who are phenomenal. We're really fortunate to be working with legendary engineer Leslie Ann Jones. Tim Davies has orchestrated everything, and he's conducting from the podium.
That's pretty sweet.
He really knows the music, and he really puts his all into interpreting what the composers are after.
Really pointed. Give me that nice pop on the end of each group. Here it is. Beautiful. Thank you.
The music originally comes in from the composer in what we call a mock-up, which is basically he's using his synthesizers and samplers, and we call them fake strings, fake brass, fake choir, to assemble the composition.
And then once it's approved, it comes to me to translate that and put it on paper for the orchestra. It's damn expensive to have an orchestra sitting there, so my job is to make sure that everything's spotless on the page in their language. When dealing with an orchestra as a conductor, I think 75% of it is your rapport and how you can interact with the musicians, getting them to do what you want in a highly stressful situation, making it lighthearted enough that no one freaks out, but you've got to keep it moving. Give me everything you've got on those crescendos at the end of each phrase. Here it is. They're a pack, and they need a leader, and they're all brilliant musicians, but there's something about when you put an orchestra together, they need that focal point, that one person that they follow. These are pretty nasty swells where you got the flutters and everything. Feel free, if it's going to be smoother, to hit the note and then start the flutter later. Okay, here we go. They can smell when you walk into the room if you can do it and if they're going to go with you. I've been lucky that, they like me, and I've been here a lot to the Ranch to conduct. And, it works really well. They're a great orchestra.
Originally on God of War 1, we had several composers, many of whom have remained with us through the God of War series. And the reason for this is not because one composer wouldn't necessarily be able to compose the whole score. It's because the variety that their different styles bring to the table is actually a tremendous advantage.
Why are there 5 composers on this score?
Well, that's a question for somebody else who did the hiring, because I'm sure that any one of us would be quite happy to bump the other ones off and do it all by ourselves.
And a different alternate to that answer is... the reason being is because each one of us actually have a very strong voice in how we write and approach music. But generally speaking, we don't clash in styles, and therefore what ends up happening is a happy salad of the different styles that we all bring to the game, but essentially we actually work very well together as a team.
Sitting with Stig and sitting with the whole Sony crew who have they have this thing in their minds called God of War. It's an entire world. It goes beyond just characters. It's a whole, they know how they want everybody, they want the players to feel. I think what ties my music and your music and everybody else's music in is the fact that the great people at Sony, from Stig and down, is they know when it's wrong and they know when it's right. And even though we haven't heard each other's music, it ties together amazingly just because it's run through this filter, and the filter is God of War.
Right. One of the great things about scoring for video games as opposed to film is that there's a tremendous amount of freedom.
I'm not constrained whatsoever by any convention at all. Because I think a video game is not a film, and since we're not restrained by anything that's happening at any particular point in time, it's quite a free world to actually envision what you want to write and see it through to the end.
The music actually is not only on a par with film, but in some ways surpasses most films. There's almost a requirement, certainly an expectation, that there be experimentation and innovation in video games, that the music is somehow striving to do something new and something really fresh and powerful, which isn't always the case in film.
When it comes to raw power, I mean, this actually goes to another level than most films.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have to write music that must exist and take care of the atmosphere that you're in and add to the intensity of the battles that you're in. It's kind of carte blanche. We get to write these amazing sounding scores and have it backed by 40-plus piece string section, 20-plus piece brass sections. The sky's the limit.
We use a oversized brass section, so it's double the size of a normal standard orchestral brass section, just to give us this massive power and this huge low end. Guys that play low instruments, all they want to do is play low, and so we give them that opportunity.
You get to unleash and not hold back, because the game never holds back, never.
I talked to the orchestra and I said, if you have any moment that you have all of a sudden a feeling of lyrical beauty your way, ignore that completely and just go for the brutal, brutish, aggressive mentality of this score, and you'll never go wrong.
That's hugely fun, and it's so much more fun to write bad music than to write, good music.
This is one of those games that actually lets you go all the way to the end of how big could it be, how nasty could it be. And it's great to do that. Of course, at the end of it, you just want to do a romantic comedy with some clarinets and...
That was really good.
At least as composers, we're being hired to do what we do, which is write melodic material, aggressive, edgy material that people remember. Think about when you went to go see your favorite movie as a kid, and you walk out humming the theme, and you want to buy the soundtrack because it's such a great part of the experience, and that's what we're trying to do.
Is to get people to buy the soundtrack to God of War.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I forgot. It's a good point.
We did just go down to the studio, and we saw where the game's at, and the game, as you probably have just played through to unlock this video, is amazing.
The programmer's role in the game is to help make everything a reality.
We make tools that allow the designers and artists to actually make the game.
If the designers want to do something or the artists want to do something, if they're smart, they'll consult us and ask, can we do this? And often we'll say no, and then they'll say we want to do it, and then we'll have to do it.
You give it to them, they give it to you, say what's wrong, then you give it back to them a little bit different, and then they say no, no, no.
Designers are pretty modest in their requirements. Designers are artists. They want the world.
The biggest challenge we face for this round of the game is content. The amount of content we need to put into a PS3 game is just order of magnitude bigger than we had to put into a PS2 game. And to drive that content around the studio, we just face, massive challenges.
We've got a little line emitter here, and it's got these particles, and it squirts them out to the right. And they get to a certain age, and they die. And one of the things we can do is we can change colour of the particle over its lifespan. Starting from bottom to top, these particles start off blue, then go green, then turn red. Now, if I was an artist, I'd make them go like orange to black to whatever to express the effect that they want to. For me, I'm a programmer, so the nice, simple programmer graphics, nice, bright, solid, simple colors so that I can see when things go wrong. If I run this within Maya, then it runs the tool code that I wrote, which is this stuff, to display on the dev kit. And hopefully, so you can see, they're never going to create anything quite like this because this is horrendous programmer stuff, but they'll take this tech and what they'll do is they'll make fire pots or lava that flows. Anything that's best rendered by creating lots of little primitives and moving them all en masse in slightly different ways that aren't just pre-baked.
This is the soul tech. These are Hades souls swimming down the river Styx. Right now they're above the river Styx, so I can see them all because the river Styx hasn't been properly watered yet. It was my task here to get them to follow the river along a bendy spline path and then ultimately to attack you. But I haven't done that part yet. Right now I'm just at the basic stage of getting them to swim down the river. The way that I did that was allow the Maya splines to be used and imported into the game, and then allow the designers to specify radii at different points of the curve. So at this point of the curve, the souls will be within that radius, and then as they come along the curve, they'll all be within this smaller radius, and then they can spread back out later here. And this is placed within the canyon just by the file structure. This loop here handles every soul. It updates all 30 of them.
Starting to do an environment, we'll receive a concept from our concept artists. And they do this elaborate, crazy drawing that looks really cool. And then from that, design already has laid out. It's basically like a sheet. You just a bunch of blocks and boxes that gameplay's already in there, it already works. From there, we go over it and we start building our level with it. You know, we layer on geometry, the hills, mountains, whatever's gonna be in there, and incorporate all that into the sheet so it all plays together nice and make it look pretty.
Every corner in the game is pretty much unique. It's handcrafted. That's the difference. You look at other games, it's an assembly line, it's mass produced. They'll build a crate and then you'll see that exact crate hundreds of times throughout the game. You don't get that in God of War.
Good people here. Everybody's really talented, super talented, but nobody has an ego or anything like that, so it's great. Well.
So what's gratifying for me is coming in every day and actually liking the job that I'm doing. You know, I bore my girlfriend with, how I'm gonna, make this sweet piece of metal like even sweeter. I enjoy talking about it, she hates it.
The biggest challenge is getting it done on time.
You lose sense of what starts to look into you, and you actually need other people's eyes to tell that. And I think working with a team of guys that are always open to giving you advice and telling you, hey, this looks great, or hey, maybe this could be worked on a little bit, really makes the art come out to look a lot better.
I'm going to show you an example of how we do collision. So here's the basic level that we're working on right now, and then we have the stuff we call sheet, which is the real basic collision stuff that Kratos walks and runs on. So this is actually built by a designer. This gives us the basic places where he needs to run and defines kind of the gameplay spaces. And then we build our art over that. So what we then have to do at a later point in development is go in and make sure there's a cylinder around here and there's a cylinder around here, and that we make sure that we put in little divots into this collision so that he doesn't get stuck on things or walk through things. And then here you can see where he is walking, there is collision. But if you look carefully right now, because the sheet isn't actually finished, his feet move through little places in the ground and things like that.
And because like there's wall, we have collision right there, he can't go through this wall, but we don't actually have any collision on this pillar, so he's gonna go whoop, and walk right through. So eventually that's what we'll have to do, is make sure that all that stuff is in there and that he can't walk through these pillars, and that's what collision is.
This is a concept by Cecil Kim, and it's the exterior of the top of Mount Olympus with the Zeus statue there, and that's where you're going to be fighting Zeus. And this is another piece that I asked Cecil to do for me, and it's a top-down of the ground. That's when concept art really comes in handy, because we have to do so much ground that Kratos is transitioning over that it's really nice to get some fresh ideas, and I'll take his drawing here and then start fleshing it out and coming up with crazy marble and gold, and yeah, this cool feather idea. You get dirt and stuff picking in between the feathers, adding, I guess, an extra layer of filth to the world. You build it clean first, and then I'm going to go in here and destroy it and make it look like a fresh battle has happened in it.
Here's an example of a piece in Tartarus. This is a gate that basically raises up on these chains from the side. This is a pretty detailed piece from what we would normally get from a concept artist. We'll get, you know, big vista shots, and then if it's an important piece, we'll get something like this to sort of detail out what it should look like. So this is what I'll get. My first step after that is to figure out these shapes in 3D. I'll create something like this. This is just a wireframe, you know, just like any video game. Nothing too special about it. We bring this into a high poly modeling program to really add a lot of the detail and like the grit and the texture. So this works a lot like real clay. You can see how I can just sort of work over it and obviously not be that sloppy, but that allows me to get all this detailing and stuff in. Once we get it to that point, we end up getting all that high poly detail as a texture. And you can't really see it too well on here, but I brought it up on this screen. You can see how a lot of that high detail gets transferred on there. That's really kind of one of the big cornerstones of all this next-gen stuff.
This is one of the Hades levels. You can see right here, it consists of a large room and then a series of halls with little torch things in there. This is pre-lit, this is just the polygons. In this game, we are pushing a lot of polygons. The environments are, at least this one is probably twice the size of a God of War 2 level in terms of polygons, and probably 4 times larger in textures. If you look at the screen here, this is the level after it's been initially lit. You see we have a nice bloom going on now, which we just got. So you can see the softness that you have along all the lights. Before, lighting used to be really harsh. The bloom just gives it kind of this real world foggy effect. Just gives the scene a nice softness to it. It's kind of a cinema quality. Eventually his lighting will match the environments and it'll look really nice.
What I've been working on lately is building the environment for a movie trailer. So it's been a little different than building a regular environment. I've imported the camera and I scrub through what the camera's going to see, and I just make sure my environment fills in all the gaps. This is the base layer of what will ultimately be a pretty dense forest. This is constantly what I do. I'll just scrub through the animation, see where the camera goes, make sure I have enough detail in certain areas. If I don't have enough detail, or you see obvious seams, I'll either cover those up or I'll consider how fast the camera's actually flying through this, and it'll all be blurred out anyway, and I won't worry about it. This scene is a little more detailed than a regular environment would be, just because it is a rendered movie. So that's the end of this camera. And then it continues on.
This is the concept that we get, and basically this is an overall of the entire level. It's a big cave, and you have these rock pillars. You got your cave with the waterfalls. You know, it has little details in there, but it gives you the whole picture. You get your rocks, the greenery, the waterfalls, and then the architectural bridges. This is basically the sheet that we get from the designers, and that's the basic layout that we start with. And from there, we start building the actual rock and geometry on top of the sheet. You have gameplay that you can go along with as you're building your levels to see exactly where the camera views are going to be and
what you need to build out. Here's an example of where I start. I have all these rocks. This is going to be a whole rock level. You have a massive level on scale compared to any of the other ones we did in God of War 1 and God of War 2. And it's all very detailed rock geometry. It takes a long time to cut all this stuff in and make it look pretty.
The original concept art that was for the grate that I designed and modeled in 3D. So here in ZBrush, obviously, I added some rope detail. Whether it was a rope or not in the concept, it looked as close. I tried to get as close as possible, so I just assumed it would be a rope. So that's what I did here, and obviously we have some of the nails going inside. This is what it came out to be. We knew we wanted a different color than what we had in the original concept, so you notice the color is a little different. We can actually bring it up to a PS3, and we can take a view of what it would look like in game. So back here is like the original model, and then here is the detailed version of that.
This is one of the pieces of concept art for the Olympus hub at the top of Mount Olympus. I'm in the process of arting it. You can see a lot of stuff is still just the gray blocking pieces, but starting to get some of the detail. Pretty much the way they have our tools set up. Anything I build here, I can, within reason, quickly send it over to the development kit. I can send the entire level over so I can run around and play and interact with the environment. I can also take chunks of the environment, send them over just so I can kind of view a specific section that I'm working on. Still a lot of gray areas I need to go in and fill in the details. See this down here still needs to be done. This is kind of our art sheet version. Just kind of block in the basic shapes and spacing and everything. These things we put in our level, they're scale versions of Kratos that we use just to make sure we're keeping our scale correct when we're building and stuff, so details don't get too out of whack.
Design basically is creating an interactive narrative within each level that the player can engage in and essentially play through.
Level design is taking the story and premise of the game and then translating it into a more tangible form that the player can experience.
Basically kind of figuring out how to lay out the gameplay to always have the carrot dangling in front of the player's head and kind of get them to the next part. What do you think?
I think that sounds amazing. The script is pretty well written out, so you get a really good written description of what's going on, like what Kratos is doing, what's happening in the story. You just kind of go from there.
I get a lot of flack because I say that we put the fun in the game, and I think that's really what we do in a nutshell.
One of the greatest things about game design is that you're able to take an idea that's in your head and make someone go and experience that.
We have so many tools in this universe and so many tools as far as what the game is built off of that we can pretty much do what we want. We're limited by our imagination, and I think that's one of the most fantastic things about working on this project.
As a designer here at Sony, you can't just be good at one thing. It's really in our hands to do it all and do it well.
We often try to integrate the puzzles into the exploration of the level and with the combat. You're going to have a lot of games where all of a sudden you're in your fight mode, and once that's done, you're in your puzzle mode, and it almost feels like you're playing two different games. One thing we try really hard to do here is to mesh those different kinds of game designs so we get a really more fluid and dynamic gameplay experience.
We essentially drive the vision of the level from the player's perspective and serving as the ambassador to them. So we need to protect their interests and make things easily understandable for them as they're playing through the level.
It's a constant push-pull as well with the designers and the artists, because the artists may want to put something that's visually more interesting in, but it could also impact the play space in a negative way.
I can't emphasize how important playtesting is to our process. If we didn't have it, the game would not be what it is, because when the player takes the product home, we don't want them to be frustrated.
You learn so much just watching people play it. That's one of the most valuable things you could ever do, is just sit down, give the person the controller, and just watch them play, see what they do.
I think one of the strongest things that this team has actually is having, the game director come in and play it, have members from all the disciplines sit down, and because everybody, chips in, hey, how are we going to animate this? Animators are sitting in. How are we going to build this? World builders are sitting in. Is this even possible? Coders are sitting in. That process makes everything just improve immensely, and I truly, truly mean that. I think a lot of people will say that, but here it's extremely, extremely, extremely noticeable.
And this is some ideas that I had for a grapple section where basically
Kratos would grapple onto a broken column, and that would cause it to fall over, and he would be rolling down the hill with it and climbing up. Kratos hits a grapple point, swings around this column, lands on the backside, which has it to tilt over. It starts rolling down a hill, and he has to scurry up it using his climb. He gets on top and then jumps off to land on a platform before the thing rolls off a cliff. So that's kind of just some of the stuff that we think. And when we talk about big moments, this is some of the stuff that we deal with. I have no set process. I'll go from paper to computer to design sheet and back to paper. It's really kind of organic. I love this idea. There was another version where we had a Titan actually holding onto it and like eating as it's rolling down, like trying to bite you like it's a piece of corn. That unfortunately didn't make it into the game, but one of the things is just because I love an idea doesn't necessarily make it the best fit for the game, and being willing to understand that and walk away from certain things that don't necessarily fit, you know, that's part of the job.
This is my grandpa's old man puzzle. It's one of these kind of puzzles you gotta figure out how to kind of put it together, but this kind of gave me some inspiration for the labyrinth. So the labyrinth is like this level where there's all these different cubes, and they're kind of like strung up throughout the cave entrance, and they're all like on these pulleys and ropes, and then as you go around the level, you kind of start slowly forming your own puzzle that you're gonna then go into. We came up with this idea for Gaia coming up to this rotunda where, you know, Zeus and Kratos are kind of having their last epic fight. And the player's thinking, you know, it's, you know, mano a mano, they're just gonna be battling, and then Gaia kind of comes into the picture and then ends up actually like physically ripping the whole building up and then like looking at it, and then you guys start fighting inside of it. She comes up and then like rips it off, and then she, you know, comes up and crushes it and takes it apart. At the end, you guys are like fighting inside of her, and you end up killing her, and then she kind of blows up and crumbles all over Mount Olympus. For me, it's always like so amazing to be able to imagine this whole kind of crazy scenario, this whole world in your head, and then you're actually able to make it.
They've been working on the Aphrodite chamber, which is where one of the infamous lovemaking mini-games will be taking place within the larger game. This is the preliminary room that I brought up in Maya. Roughly what's going to be happening is Kratos is going to be going through a hallway here where he's going to come to this room. There's going to be a bed in the corner with curtains drawn, and as soon as he casts them open, he's going to see Aphrodite with two of her very lovely servant girls who quickly run away. She's going to go into the bed for a little hanky-panky, and we see the servants are very happy right there with what's going on. After finishing his job, Aphrodite is kind enough to draw back this large curtain, which will expose the portal, which will lead to another section of the game. So that's generally an idea of how we mock up an event relatively quickly so that we can assess how the gameplay will be, and then we can forward that off to art so that they can make it pretty. And this is some of the things that concept art has done. This is the bed right here that you saw. It looks a little more fancy than the blocks that I've been using. Once that's done, I will implement them into the game, and everything will mesh together perfectly.
Be gone.